Hello, this is Kevin Henry. This is my interview with Noelle, who lives in Seattle and who shared her story of survival and resilience. As a young woman, she found herself in a dangerous and abusive relationship. Today, she helps other survivors of domestic violence and other forms of sexual abuse.
Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah. So basically, my story is really, and I'm not gonna like go into long detail and all that, but it's really actually quite common. And what happened with me was I come from a middle class family, looks okay from the outside, not okay on the inside, a lot of domestic violence, alcoholism, abuse, a lot of verbal stuff. And that was the family I grew up in. And I started having like anxiety attacks and panic attacks really young, just from the fear of my father. And I discovered alcohol at about 13 years old. And I started drinking with people and stuff like that, and I noticed that took away my anxiety. And so I would drink whenever I could, and I ended up getting a boyfriend, and he was my age, just, same age, just another kid that went to my school, and I ended up getting pregnant at 15. And when my family found out, my father told me to leave and to never come back. So I left and never came back. So basically I was homeless at the age of 15 years old. So I kind of couch surfed. Some parents felt bad for me, let me stay there for a while. I kind of, got around for a while with friends, but then, that ends at a certain point, and you end up meeting a lot of different people when you're just on the streets and you have all the freedom in the world as a youth, You don't have any responsibilities or any parents or anybody telling you what to do. But you also don't have any money or hope for the future, At least I didn't. And I met a guy in a grocery store parking lot, and he was there with some other guys, and he was like older than me, but not really a lot older than me. So he was old enough to where I thought he was really cute, and he had like a nice car, and he had nice clothes, and he had nice jewelry, and he wanted to talk to me. And so we started talking, and looking back now, I can remember the first things that he asked me were, where was my family? What was my situation? Where did I live? Did I have children, and where were they? And he was really interested in my situation, and which I thought meant that he cared, right? So then he became like my boyfriend, but as he was my boyfriend, he was, now looking back, I realized what he was doing was grooming me all along. He would start getting my nails done, getting my hair done, taking me to nice restaurants, doing things for me that I could not do for myself, treating me in a way that I'd never been treated before. Doing really nice things for me. But then, on the other hand, he was also abusive, which I was used to because that's what I came from.
So when
I thought he'd...
I'm sorry, could you describe the abuse a little bit? Cause just to be more specific, was it more physical and emotional?
It was both, yeah. It was physical and emotional. So, like, if I did something that, he taught me the language, which something that was out of pocket, which means something that I'm not supposed to do, like he would slap me, And that's like about the extent of it. There was no punching or beating me until much later. But he was grooming me he told me he was a pimp, but I didn't believe him because like a lot of guys say that, you know, and I was like, oh, you're a pimp, yeah, right. I thought he was a drug dealer. And I was like, he's not a pimp. And I never saw girls or anything with him, so I didn't think that. And then one day he asked me if I wanted to come to California and on a road trip with him. And I said that I would. And I was really excited about it and happy about it. And, of course, 'cause every young girl wants to go to Hollywood. And I felt really privileged that he wanted me to go with him. And so we drove down to Hollywood, and basically that's when it all went down. And we were in a motel room on Sunset Boulevard, and I didn't have anything. He had my ID. He had everything. I had no money. I had nothing. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know anybody. And he got really violent, and he let me know that I was going to go out and I was going to make some money.
Wow.
And if I didn't, he knew where my son was, and he was going to have my son kidnapped.
Mm-hmm.
And also he was going to hurt me really bad and leave me there.
Yeah.
So that was how it all went down. And from then on, it was like, I just got worse and worse and worse and worse, and the abuse got worse. But he was also very, very manipulative. These guys are really good at what they do, and they say that, trafficking victims have the same type of PTSD as victims that have been in wars,
Mm-hmm.
There's Stockholm syndrome involved,
Mm-hmm.
These guys get in your head and they convince you that you are nothing but what they've made you become.
Mm-hmm.
And you're nothing without them, and you believe it. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. You get deeper and deeper and deeper. You get more depressed. You get more removed, isolated, and then all you have is him.
And so this went on for several years?
That went on for several years, yeah. And I would run away. I ran away one time, and he found me. I would always run away back to Seattle. He would keep me mostly in San Diego, Arizona, out of Seattle, because I'm from here. Excuse me. And I would run back to Seattle, and one time he found me. He beat me up, handcuffed me, threw me in the trunk of the car, and I woke up in Portland. So, another time I left him, he put Xerox pictures of my son and put them all over the telephone poles and said, missing child.
Mm-hmm.
I would always end up going back because I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, the last time he beat me so bad that he was afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't want me around him because, first of all, he didn't want anybody to see me with him, or anywhere near him because I was so beat up. And I think it also scared him because he almost killed me.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up coming back to Seattle, and I had to get CAT scans on my brain. I had to get all this stuff done. My nose was broken. I mean, it was horrible. And that time I ended up staying away from him. I didn't go back with him, and then he was arrested not too long after that.
Now, what year was that, roughly? What time frame was that?
Well, he was arrested in 1990, I believe.
Mm.
I must have got away from him in it must. Wait a minute, no. He was arrested in 2000. I'm confused.
Right.
He was arrested in 2000. Must have got away from him in like maybe 95.
Mm. And you were like in your 20s then, right?
Yeah, I was in my 20s then, yeah.
Okay. All right.
And you gotta understand, this whole time thing is a total weird thing for me. So, like it all kind of just runs together. But yeah, I was in my 20s by the time I got away from him. And then I realized what happened was I was so beat down from my whole deal with him. I didn't think could do anything else. You know, I'd never had a job. I had no education, no resume, no nothing. I had no idea how to live in what we call the square world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we call in the civilian world. I didn't know how to live in that world. And so I figured out that there was escort services. And so that's how come. And then I ended up in strip clubs. So there was a total of 15 years.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah. So I got out in 2004, I believe.
And what was the turning point that got you from, I guess, the strip club escort situation to, was it just like this big awakening one day, or was it a kind of a gradual transition that you went?
It was really gradual, yeah. By the time, you know, I was in the strip club, I was like older for that game, I guess. I was a veteran, you know what I'm saying? These little 18-year-old girls were coming through the door, brand new, you know, and I'd watch them just turn into drug addicts really fast. And, you know, I was just getting sick of the whole thing. You know, I was just getting really tired of it, really, really tired of it.
And this was in Seattle? I'm sorry.
This was in Seattle. I was working at Rick's.
Rick's. Is that up on Bothell Way?
Lake City Way. Yeah.
Oh, Lake City Way, right. Yeah, I remember that place.
Well, I worked for the Calcurcio for a number of years. Frank Calcurcio. He's just another pimp. He was just another. Oh, I don't even want to say that because
that's all right.
You don't have mafia. But anyway, so anyway, I didn't have a pimp obviously by that point, and I was making enough money, so I figured out that I could save money and somehow get out of this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I saved some money, and not nearly enough money, but enough money to like help me out. And I just went in one day and I walked out the door and I was like, I'm never going back.
Mm-hmm.
And I never went back. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. Like, I was, 32 years old. I didn't have any idea. I had never had a job.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea how I was going to, survive or make it in the civilian world at all. And back then there was no services, and that's why I started off.
Mm-hmm.
There was nobody to talk to or to help me, so I did it all on my own. And I just started going to school, and I got a job. My first job was at a bar, and it was perfect because I worked as a server, and it was like a nightclub bar, and I made good money, and it was cash, so it was a good transition. But it still wasn't what I was used to, but it took me many years to learn how to live off just the paycheck,
Right.
I didn't know how to do that. So it's been a long journey.
And so let me ask you a question before I forget, because I know that you've told this story in various versions over the years. And how do you feel when you have to, or when you just recount those memories and everything? Is it a good experience, or does it bring up like some old emotions, or is it difficult? How would you describe that, talking about this?
Well, I mean, no, especially, no, it's not good. It doesn't bring up any happiness at all. I mean, especially when I was being trafficked, I mean, that was absolutely horrible and horrifying. I mean, getting into cars with people you don't know, getting raped repeatedly by people you don't know and not being able to do anything about it, being beat up by Johns, being thrown out of cars, having guns to your head, being hit with baseball bats, like all that kind of stuff is what happens out there, And so it doesn't bring any happiness to me at all. No, but it also doesn't hurt me to talk about it, because I'm beyond that at this point in my life. It doesn't hurt me to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate you, the willingness that you have in talking about it. And another question I had, which is kind of related. There was a recent, I think it was maybe it was about a year ago now, there was a big sting in Bellevue up at one of those really nice condominium towers. And I guess there were like 30 or 40 men, some of them very prominent, including a local sports caster in Seattle. And it turned out that it was a ring of, I guess, these girls from the Philippines or whatever, and they were just, running this prostitution ring out of this place. And I always thought, because a lot of these guys, they go home to their families, they're upstanding, quote, upstanding, men in the community. Don't they ever wonder or care? They must know that these women, a lot of times that they're with, especially I would think some of the ones that are from foreign countries, are in a bad situation. But is it just the Johns just somehow detach themselves from the significance of what's going on?
I mean, I can't speak for all men, but I mean, there seems to be a large, I mean, you never know. I mean, you never know if the person's being trafficked because they're not going to tell you. You know what I mean? So, like, anybody, it could be any woman or boy or whoever, they're never going to tell you that, they go home and, they have to have a certain amount of money or they get beat. They're never going to tell, So it's like, it could be anybody that you're buying could be being exploited by a third party.
Yeah, because I guess, and this leads me to just the whole idea of what I mentioned earlier about, being proactive in the sense that, I always think that a lot of adults who wind up in jail or doing horrible things most of them didn't start out that way, but somewhere along the line they got the idea that it was okay to hurt other people, or it was acceptable to, express their anger by beating up another person or buying them or whatever. And I guess I just feel like there should be some training and education with young boys and girls when they're much, much younger about just respect and how you treat another human being, because it's just amazing to me how people can just, mistreat and then justify it somehow in their own mind, I guess.
Well, most definitely. I mean, and what it needs to happen, and there's an organization here called Seattle Against Slavery. They do a lot of work in the schools, and as young as we can possibly get, as young as we can get, is when you talk to the kids. And the boys, and the girls are learning about sex on the internet through porn, which is violence against women. So, you know, it's very scary times right now because this is where our children are learning how to treat the opposite sex, you know. And you know, back in the old days, maybe a boy would find a Playboy under his dad's pillow or something. You know, I mean, now it's like they're watching hardcore porn on their phone.
Right.
You know, and like this is where they're learning. So we've got to get into the schools and talk to them about how, you know, that's not real. You know, how and explain to them how you treat each other and really teach them, because it's our job. It's our job to do that. And, you know, we've got to, or else this is just going to get worse and the violence is going to get worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I just think there's just a desensitization, I think, that happens in society. And, you know, like I said earlier in the beginning of the phone call, I'm just really trying to get your video out there and just get people to at least start thinking about it and thinking about that, hey, you know, this might be something that's problematic. It's not just something to go, oh, well, you know how guys are and, you know, the prostitutes, well, they're in it for it's almost like sometimes people will justify it by saying, well, the prostitutes are like entrepreneurs. You know, and again, like you just said, I mean, some maybe they've got their act together, and that's one thing. But so many of them, like you say, are being trafficked and beaten up and abused, and there's just no advantage that these women have, or boys. It's not always women, of course.
Right. No, a lot of boys. Yeah, I mean, people think what they want to think, you know. They don't. It's a huge problem. I mean, it's a huge problem. Think about it. Like, okay, the drug cartels, the gangs, everybody. Okay, you can sell drugs. You can only sell them one time. You can sell guns. You can only sell them one time. You can sell a person. You can sell a person a whole bunch of times. So, sex trafficking is huge because there's so much money involved in this, you know, and people, they don't think it's a problem. That's insane to me because, I mean, maybe it's not insane because if you don't really know about it, how would you know, right? But
exactly.
The thing is that, right, domestic sex trafficking here in the United States is huge problem. I mean, I work with youth. You know, I've worked with youth since I've been out of the life. I cannot tell you, almost every girl that I've met with that's been involved in the juvenile justice system has been trafficked. Almost every one of them. And you know what? You would never know it because their record doesn't show it. You would never know it unless you've been in it because you can tell by their language, you can tell by the way they carry themselves, you can tell a lot of things. And they will admit it once you talk to them and tell them, hey, I was in that too, you know, so you can talk to me. But I have met in foster youth, I mean, that's just the story of foster youth. I said that in the video. Right. So many foster youth get involved and get trafficked because they're looking for love. Well, they're looking for family.
And when you say the language and their body language or the way they talk, could you be a little more descriptive about that? What are some of the signs that somebody might be able to recognize that somebody's being trafficked?
Well, you know, I can do a training on the language. We use a whole different language than civilians. Okay, so and I'm using it right now a little bit. there's a whole different language that's being used. So there's little words they'll say, oh, charge it to the game or something like that, or they'll say something like, oh, they always call them their boyfriends. They're never going to say my trafficker, my pimp. They always think it's their boyfriend, but they'll have their nails done, they'll have their hair done, they'll maybe be wearing clothes that they probably can't afford, or where would they get those, or they all of a sudden start having new things that you don't know where they're getting the money for them, starting to dress differently, trying to be more, grown up than grown than they are. All those things. But the nails are always a giveaway.
Mhm. Well, that's
you got a 13 or 14-year-old in a room, and she's got her nails done. I know right away that she's been trafficked.
Oh boy! Wow. Well, hold on one second because I'm going to stop the recording. Yeah.